What would you think if a rookie pilot, barely trusted with combat duties, suddenly performed a maneuver so insane that seasoned commanders believed the radar was malfunctioning? Before anyone could process what was happening, 5 enemy aircraft were falling from the sky, and only 90 seconds had passed. But how does someone with almost no battlefield experience execute something so bold, so mathematically improbable that it defies both training and common sense? This is where our story begins, in the uneasy silence between an inevitable defeat and a decision that no manual had ever dared. The young pilot had been in the air for barely a few minutes when the warning lights came alive. A hostile formation approached fast, layered, disciplined, and confident, the kind of enemy presence that forced even elite squadrons to rethink engagement. And yet, instead of retreating, instead of calling for assistance, instead of following the standard playbook drilled into him endlessly at the academy, he accelerated toward them. His voice over the radio was strangely calm, almost detached, as if he were seeing something invisible to the rest, a pattern, a weakness, a window that would exist for mere seconds. What makes a man choose audacity over survival? Was it instinct, desperation, or something deeper? A hidden clarity that emerges only when the world narrows into the thin, trembling line between life and death. Witnesses later claimed that his first turn was physically absurd, a harsh break that even aces avoided. But the radar confirmed it. He pivoted at an angle that forced the enemy formation to compress, disrupt its own geometry, and creates a lethal cluster point that no one had anticipated. And once that window opened, his decision was instantaneous and irreversible. This wasn't just a maneuver. It was a gamble so outrageous that analysts would, years later, compare it to a grandmaster sacrificing half his pieces to deliver a checkmate in 3 moves. Every second mattered. Every degree of tilt carried weight. And during those 90 seconds, something awakened in him. A rhythm, a predatory intuition that made the impossible suddenly feel precise, almost calculated. Before command could issue a single order, before anyone understood the unfolding chaos, the rookie was carving through the sky like a blade slicing through fabric. But here's the unsettling question that still haunts military historians. How does someone with no combat background identify a flaw in enemy formation that experts failed to predict? Was it luck disguised as genius? Or genius disguised as recklessness? And if this maneuver was truly intentional, what did he see that no one else saw? As we step deeper into this story, we uncover patterns, theories, and truths that challenge everything we think we know about aerial strategy and about human instinct under extreme pressure. If this incredible story of audacity and instinct has you on the edge of your seat, don't just sit there. Make your voice heard. Drop a comment below sharing what you think went through the rookie pilot's mind during those 90 seconds of chaos. Did he rely purely on skill, luck, or something deeper? Your insights matter, and they help create a community of history enthusiasts who keep these forgotten feats alive. While you're at it, make sure to hit that like button. Every single click helps these untold stories reach more people who deserve to witness the bravery, the strategy, and the split-second decisions that changed the course of aerial combat. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story where history, ingenuity, and human courage collide. These moments are more than just historical footnotes. They are lessons in thinking differently under pressure, in seizing the impossible, and in rewriting the rules when conventional tactics fail. Engaging with this content ensures that more people can learn, debate, and marvel at the incredible feats that shaped history. The enemy squadron didn't They just appeared. It unfolded across the radar like a steel curtain descending from the sky. Tight formation, perfect spacing, synchronized movement. Everything about their approach signaled overwhelming superiority. These weren't rookies. These were veterans trained to dominate the air by sheer discipline and coordinated aggression. Any pilot with experience would have recognized this pattern instantly. And known that engaging it alone bordered on suicidal. Yet this was precisely the moment our rookie found himself thrust into, hovering between protocol and instinct, order and improvisation. The formation consisted of 5 fighters positioned in a classic Shettertrap geometry. It was designed to lure reckless opponents toward the center before collapsing from both flanks, slicing through anyone foolish enough to approach. Analysts later noted that new Sony pilot would willingly fly into that structure. It was engineered to exploit predictable reactions, punish hesitation, and annihilate anything caught in its jaws. But perhaps what the squadron didn't expect was someone who hadn't yet learned to fear it. Someone young enough to see possibilities where veterans saw only locked doors. From his cockpit, the enemy planes looked like dark arrows carving arcs through the sky, their engines humming with ruthless coordination. Every shift they made narrowed his options. Every second that passed brought them closer to the moment when evasive maneuvers would no longer be possible. Under normal circumstances, protocol dictated pulling back, regrouping, and waiting for reinforcement. But circumstances weren't normal. The rookie was isolated, cut off, and measured against a threat that logically exceeded his capabilities. What made this situation uniquely dangerous wasn't just the number of enemy fighters. It was the predictability of the situation. A rookie pilot, alone, confronted by a superior formation. The enemy expected fear, retreat, maybe even panic. They expected him to react exactly as the manuals taught: brake right, descent, attempt a rolling escape. The formation was designed to counter every textbook solution. But at this exact moment, something subtle shifted the kind of detail that experienced pilots sometimes overlook because they trust the structure too deeply. The formation was perfect, perhaps too perfect. Military historians often argue that flawless geometry can create blind spots. When every unit is perfectly synchronized, it becomes easier to predict the group, but also easier for an outsider to disrupt it if they act unpredictably enough. And here lies the first crack in the armor. The formation was rigid, confident, overcommitted to its own structure. A single rogue variable, moving fast and irrationally, could potentially break the pattern. The rookie may not have known this consciously, but he felt it: the tension, the rhythm, the tiny hesitation in the enemy SE realignment. He wasn't facing 5 planes. He was facing a machine built on assumptions, and assumptions can be weaponized. What happened next would force every commander monitoring the radar to question everything they believed about aerial dominance. But to understand that moment, the pivot point where fear turned into opportunity, we need to dissect the choice that came next. A decision so reckless, so immediate, that many would later call it a mistake, until the consequences proved otherwise. Every pilot is taught one fundamental rule: never surrender positional advantage without a concrete plan to recover it. Yet in the critical moments before the encounter, the rookie did something that horrified the commanders watching his telemetry. Instead of maintaining altitude or maneuvering into a defensive arc, he abruptly deviated from protocol and executed a steep, destabilizing dive. On paper, it looked like a catastrophic lapse in judgment. The kind of maneuver that gets pilots court-martialed, not celebrated. But this mistake, as it first appeared, would become the pivot on which the entire battle turned. Inside the cockpit, Alarms blared, the frame vibrated violently, and oxygen levels fluctuated as the rookie forced his aircraft into an angle nearly guaranteed to compromise stability. From the ground, analysts assumed he was panicking. A rookie under pressure, overwhelmed, committing the fatal error. The enemy formation was designed to provoke. Even the enemy pilots interpreted the action as a desperate escape attempt. Retreat, disorientation, loss of nerve, and that is precisely why they adjusted their trajectories, a micro-correction only noticeable when analyzed frame by frame. They moved to intercept a fleeing target. They took the bait. What no one realized at the time was that this dangerous dive disrupted the engagement timeline entirely. The enemy pilots, conditioned to trap prey that behaved predictably, accelerated into a closer speed faster than their formation could safely maintain. By assuming the rookie was breaking away, they shifted into an aggressive pursuit pattern, momentarily abandoning the symmetry that held their structure together. This was the first hairline fracture in an otherwise unbreakable shape, a small, nearly invisible error induced by the rookie's apparent failure, but there was more. The dive changed not only the geometry of the encounter, but also the sensory expectations of everyone involved. The sun, previously behind him, now aligned at an angle that partially blinded two of the pursuing fighters. The distance he lost during the dive gave him the space needed to angle back up with a momentum curve none of the enemies were prepared for. And most importantly, this sudden loss of altitude created a false narrative. A pilot losing control, descending into chaos, on the verge of being eliminated. Military strategists later compared this moment to a chess player deliberately sacrificing their queen, a move so drastic that the opponent's confidence becomes their downfall. The rookie wasn't panicking. He was resetting the board. He understood or instinctively sensed that breaking the rhythm of the enemy formation was the only path to survival, and by presenting them with an apparent weakness, he ignited their hunger to close in for the kill. There was a brief second, just one, when telemetry showed his aircraft stabilize at the lowest point of the dive. And in that instant, before anyone could comprehend what was happening, he initiated a counter-maneuver so abrupt that even modern simulations struggled to replicate its precision. This was the moment when the mistake transformed into opportunity. This was the split second when the rookie's fate and the fate of the 5 enemy fighters changed forever. But the true brilliance of what happened next isn't found in the dive itself. It's found in what he did immediately after a maneuver, so violent and unprecedented that most experts still consider it physically unreasonable. And yet, in the chaos that followed, it became the decisive stroke that flipped the encounter upside down. To understand what happened next, you have to picture the aircraft not as a machine, but as a body pushed to the brink of physical violation. When the rookie pulled out of the dive, he didn't simply correct his trajectory. He weaponized momentum. The sudden climb he initiated was so steep, so violent, that engineers reviewing the telemetry years later questioned how the airframe didn't tear itself apart. The G-forces surged far beyond what pilots are supposed to endure, causing tunnel vision, near blackout conditions, and a razor-thin margin between consciousness and oblivion. And yet, against all logic, the rookie remained alert enough to calculate angles, distances, and firing windows with inhuman precision. The maneuver hinged on exploiting a blind zone created by the enemy. Formations overextended pursuit. By diving hard and slingshotting upward with a burst of acceleration, he created a vertical inversion, a rare, dangerous motion in which the attacker suddenly emerges beneath the enemy's trajectory instead of ahead or behind it. Most pilots avoid this dynamic because the timing must be perfect. 1 second too early and the enemy breaks away. 1 second too late, and you fly directly into their firing cone. But the rookie hit the window with uncanny accuracy, emerging at an angle that sliced straight through the heart of the formation. From this position, he executed a micro-roll, a seemingly insignificant twist of the aircraft that, in reality, changed everything. The roll reoriented his nose just enough to bring the first target into alignment while simultaneously dragging his line of fire across the others. It was a technique theorists called dynamic sweep tracking, but it had never been successfully performed at such speeds, and certainly not by someone with minimal combat experience. Radar footage shows the moment clearly. 5 blips clustered, one rogue blip rising fast beneath them, and then a streak of movement so abrupt that analysts originally assumed it was a glitch. The rookie had turned his fighter into a kinetic blade, and here's the detail that stunned historians. His aircraft should not have been able to maintain structural integrity during the maneuver. The combination of velocity, angle, and torque placed it under mechanical stress calculated to exceed the operational limits. Yet it held, not because it was built for such extremes, but because the rookie's timing minimized the duration of maximum force. He didn't fight physics, he synchronized with it, allowing inertia, lift, and gravity to momentarily coexist in a fragile equilibrium. His first burst of fire wasn't random. It was a surgical strike delivered at the only moment when all 5 enemy fighters occupied overlapping arcs of vulnerability. The climb, the inversion, the roll. They were all part of a chain reaction that compressed the enemy's maneuver space into a narrow funnel. Inside that funnel, their speed and formation worked against them. They couldn't break, couldn't scatter, couldn't reset. They were trapped by the very discipline that once made them unstoppable. And the rookie knew it, or felt it before anyone else did. Military engineers examining the footage called the maneuver statistically invisible. It defied expectations, simulations, and doctrine. Yet it worked because it forced the enemy into a configuration where any deviation would cause collision, chaos, or structural overload. The rookie's maneuver didn't just outfly them. It outsmarted the physics governing their movement. But the sky was about to descend into absolute chaos. That first kill was only the beginning. In the next few seconds, the air would erupt into a sequence of shocks, failures, explosions, and split-second reactions that no historian has ever fully agreed upon. And in the center of that storm was the rookie, calm, focused, and somehow always one motion ahead of death itself. The moment the rookie fired his first burst, the sky transformed from a structured battlefield into a collapsing storm of panic, metal, and instinct. The enemy formation, once flawless, now fractured like shattered glass. Their tie geometry, so effective only seconds earlier, became a deadly trap. The lead fighter erupted into flames almost instantly, its wing detaching in a spiral of burning debris. That single explosion forced the remaining 4 fighters into abrupt evasive maneuvers, and it was in this instant of chaos that the rookie seized control of the engagement. What followed was a sequence so fast, so violent, that analysts reviewing the footage were forced to slow it down to 1/10 speed to understand how 5 kills occurred in 90 seconds. After the first explosion, 2 enemy planes attempted to break left in a mirrored escape, but this synchronized reflex betrayed them. Their movements overlapped just enough for the rookie to anticipate the arc of their flight paths. He swung his aircraft into a rising intercept angle, firing a calculated burst that clipped the stabilizer of one fighter and detonated the fuel line of the other. The sky lit up again to more fireballs, tearing through the air, their trajectories intersecting in a brutal choreography of destruction. Observers on the ground described the sequences watching a fault line rupture. The sudden triple loss sent the remaining enemy pilots into disarray. Their headsets exploded with conflicting commands: pull up, brake right, counter-rotate. Their formation dissolved into a scramble of desperate improvisation. One pilot attempted a high-speed dive to reset altitude advantage, but the rookie was already beneath him, rising in a sharp vertical climb that placed him directly under the enemy's blind spot. A single, precise shot pierced the engine block. The fourth fighter spiraled downward, trailing smoke like a wounded comet that left Juan. Military doctrine suggests that the final surviving opponent is often the most dangerous, driven by panic or adrenaline, capable of unpredictable and irrational behavior. But this pilot made a critical error. He tried to regain distance rather than in doing so, he exposed his rear flank. The rookie tightened his pursuit, engine roaring against the strain of aggressive thrust. He closed the gap in seconds, aligning his sight with a precision usually attributed only to aces. One final burst short, controlled, lethal. The fifth plane disintegrated into a streak of scattered metal. And then silence. 90 seconds had passed. Not 90 seconds of ordinary combat, 90 seconds that broke doctrine, logic, and expectation. Commanders monitoring the battle struggled to process what they had seen. Some believed multiple friendly pilots were engaging simultaneously. Others assumed a malfunction in the radar system. No one was willing to accept the truth. A rookie pilot, alone, overwhelmed by numbers and trapped in a scenario engineered for defeat, had dismantled an entire enemy formation with instinct, improvisation, and an almost animalistic sense of timing. Yet the deeper, more fascinating mystery wasn't the kills themselves. It was the method, the strange efficiency, the intuitive understanding of enemy panic, the way he maneuvered as if he could sense not only position, but the emotional state of his opponents. Historians debate this moment even now. Was it raw talent under pressure, or did the rookie tap into a level of situational awareness that military training rarely unlocks? What remains undeniable is that these 90 seconds reshaped the doctrine of aerial combat. But to understand the full magnitude of what happened, we must step inside the pilot's mind, into the mental battlefield where fear, instinct, and calculation collided to produce the most improbable victory of his life. To grasp the full magnitude of this impossible victory, we must step away from the mechanics of flight and into the far more unpredictable arena inside the pilot's mind. Because no matter how extraordinary his maneuvers were, something deeper was unfolding in those 90 seconds, something that blended fear, instinct, and a razor-sharp predatory focus rarely witnessed, even among the most seasoned aces. The question that has baffled historians for decades is this: how does a rookie with barely any combat experience maintain absolute mental clarity in a situation engineered for his destruction? Inside the cockpit, the rookie wasn't just fighting enemy planes, he was fighting his own biology. Heart rate spiking, adrenaline flooding his bloodstream, oxygen fluctuations threatening his cognitive stability, all while G-forces squeezed his vision into a narrowing tunnel. Most pilots buckle under this convergence of pressures, but the rookie did something else entirely. Instead of panicking, he entered what psychologists later described as a hyperfocus state, a mental corridor where perception sharpens, time stretches, and the brain prioritizes survival with laser-point precision. Survivors of extreme combat often describe this sensation as falling into rhythm, a moment when fear dissolves into instinctive action. And in the rookie's case, this rhythm manifested as an uncanny ability to anticipate movement, predict panic, and exploit hesitation. What outsiders saw as reckless improvisation might, from his perspective, have felt like the only logical path. As the sky erupted around him, his mind wasn't scattered, it was converging. Each explosion, each evasive motion, each shift in the enemy's formation seemed to draw him deeper into an almost primal awareness. But there was another layer at play, one that military psychologists argue is exceedingly rare. The rookie had no emotional attachment to doctrine. He hadn't yet internalized the rigid frameworks that often shape a pilot's decision-making under pressure. In other words, he had nothing to unlearn. Where veteran pilots might hesitate, second-guess, or attempt to replicate textbook maneuvers, he relied instead on pure sensory input. The angle of an engine flare, the sudden hesitation in an enemy swing alignment, the micro-delay of panic radiating through the formation. Every detail became data, every breath a calculation. Observers, reviewing the radio recordings, noticed something peculiar. His voice remained calm, not heroic, not detached, simply steady. This emotional neutrality allowed him to operate with a clarity most pilots lose the moment they realized they're outnumbered. His brain had entered what neuroscientists refer to as the fluid zone, where the boundary between conscious decision and instinct blurs. And perhaps the most surprising mental factor of all was his inexperience. Instead of being weighed down by the fear of making the wrong tactical decision, he had only one metric: survival. This stripped-down mindset, unencumbered by protocol, opened the door for a level of improvisation that veteran pilots simply wouldn't dare attempt. Some historians now argue that in those 90 seconds, the rookie wasn't thinking like a soldier. He was thinking like a predator, fixed on opportunity, reading vulnerability, responding not with strategy but with instinct honed by a lifetime of interpreting motion, speed, and danger long before he ever touched a cockpit. But while this psychological transformation explains how he made the decisions, it does not yet explain how he sustained them, because the moment the enemy formation collapsed, a new challenge emerged, one that would expose the reactions of every pilot witnessing the ordeal from afar. While the rookie carved through the sky with an instinctive precision no one could have predicted, his squadron, watching from scattered positions across the battlefield, was plunged into a state of disbelief. At first, they assumed the explosions were the result of coordinated support fire or a hidden Allied unit entering the combat zone. Nothing in their training prepared them to interpret what the radar now displayed: a single friendly blip slicing through 5 enemy markers like a scalpel through paper. Confusion spread across the radio channels, punctuated by fragmented questions, rising panic, and the unsettling absence of any logical explanation. Senior pilots, hardened by years of battle, were the first to react. They demanded verification, assuming the instruments had glitched or that fog of war distortions were warping sensor readings. Yet every recalibration confirmed the same impossible truth. The rookie was dismantling a formation that should have overwhelmed him within seconds. Some pilots attempted to reroute and provide backup, but they were too far, too slow, and too out of position to influence the fight. All they could do was listen, watch, and try to understand a sequence of events that defied doctrine. Inside the command vessel, officers scrambled to interpret the unfolding chaos. The tactical screen flickered with alerts. Enemy fighters down, unidentified acceleration spikes, gravitational stress anomalies on the rookie's aircraft. At one point, A commander actually shouted for someone to fix the radar feed, convinced it was looping earlier data. But when visual confirmation arrived, debris trails, incendiary plumes, and the unmistakable warp of shockwaves, they were forced to confront the truth. The rookie wasn't just surviving. He was dominating. This realization struck the squadron with a mixture of awe and dread. Oh, because they were witnessing the feat of aerial combat unmatched in recorded history. Dread, because such brilliance was unpredictable, unrepeatable, and potentially catastrophic. A pilot capable of performing outside the boundaries of doctrine could become an asset or a liability. Was he improvising with genius soar, flying beyond the edge of reason? In war, brilliance and recklessness often share the same silhouette, but the emotional undercurrent hitting the squadron was far more human. They were watching one of their own face annihilation, alone in the wind. A rookie, the quiet figure many had overlooked or dismissed, was now demonstrating a level of instinctive mastery that reshaped their understanding of the battlefield. Envy, disbelief, admiration, and fear all blended into an uneasy cocktail. For the first time, they weren't just reacting to the fight, they were reacting to him. Even as the fifth enemy fighter fell in a fireball, the squadron struggled to recalibrate. Their formation fractured as senior pilots debated whether to regroup, pursue new targets, or converge on the rookie's position. But the skies had changed. The battle had changed. And they knew with a sinking clarity that whatever happened next would define not just the outcome of the mission, but the reputation of a pilot whose name they barely remembered an hour earlier. The squadron's attempt to regain coherence marked the beginning of a new phase one, where analysis, reconstruction, and accountability would collide. Because once the dust settled, there would be questions. How did it happen? Why did it happen? Why? And more importantly, what truths were hidden inside the aftermath of that 90-second miracle. In the immediate aftermath of the engagement, the air still trembled with the fading echoes of explosions, and the battlefield smelled of scorched metal drifting downward through broken clouds. But once the final enemy plane vanished from the radar, the atmosphere shifted from chaos to calculation. Commanders, analysts, and senior officers converged like vultures circling the site of a mystery. They needed answers because victories of this magnitude do not happen without explanation. And explanations in wartime can be as dangerous as the battles themselves. The rookie was ordered to return to base immediately, not for a celebration, but for scrutiny. His aircraft, strained beyond its design limits, showed signs of near failure. Warped structural joints, overheated engine components, and stress fractures so severe that ground crews wondered how the frame had endured even a minute longer. Every sensor log, camera feed, and telemetry packet was extracted with urgency. There was no protocol for a pilot shooting down 5 planes in 90 seconds. There was only the cold demand for truth. The initial review sent shockwaves through the command room. Analysts discovered anomalies in the rookie's maneuvered at angles of attack considered unsafe, acceleration curves bordering on the mathematically impossible, and a flight path that, when mapped, traced a pattern so intricate that one senior engineer described it as a blueprint for a controlled chaos. Even more unsettling was his biometric record. Elevated stress markers, yes, but none of the panic spikes typical of pilots in life-or-death situations. His mind had remained eerily stable through the entire encounter. Then came the video reconstruction. Frame by frame, the investigators watched the rookie flip the laws of aerial engagement on their heads. The dive that looked like a mistake, the climb that should have blacked him out, the inversion that bypassed enemy fire, and finally, The series of firing bursts, so perfectly timed that ballistics experts insisted they resembled simulator-generated sequences, not spontaneous human action. But the most shocking revelation came not from the flight data but from the enemy's recovered communications. Fragmented radio transmissions, intercepted during the battle, revealed utter confusion within the opposing formation. Pilots screamed contradictory orders, misread their own tracking systems, and made disastrous assumptions about the rookie's intentions. In one recovered snippet, an enemy commander shouted, "He's behind us, no? Below, no? Above, what is he doing?" It became clear that the rookie hadn't overwhelmed them with superior weaponry. He had overwhelmed them with unpredictability. Psychologists, reviewing the encounter, identified a rare combat effect called tactical dissonance when one pilot behaves so far outside expected patterns that the enemy's collective decision-making collapses. The rookie's movements were not just physically daring, they were cognitively His unpredictability became a weapon, disrupting the enemy's hierarchy of response and forcing errors at every critical intersection. By the end of the investigation, a disturbing question lingered in the air. Was this pilot a prodigy whose instincts defied doctrine, or had the chaos of battle accidentally unlocked the perfect sequence of decisions, a sequence even he might never replicate? The truth was buried under layers of speculation, technical reports, and hushed conversations among high-ranking officers. But one thing was undeniable. The events of those 90 seconds had exposed weaknesses not just in enemy tactics, but in the very assumptions underlying aerial warfare. And soon, those assumptions would be rewritten not by theorists, but by commanders eager to transform a one-simulative moment into a repeatable doctrine. In the weeks that followed the investigation, the 90-second miracle transformed from a battlefield anomaly into the most studied engagement in modern aerial warfare. What began as a desperate improvisation by an inexperienced pilot was now being dissected in conference rooms filled with commanders, engineers, psychologists, and strategists. The rookie didn't just survive an impossible encounter. He had exposed a tactical blind spot large enough to reach how air forces around the world approached close-range combat, and before long, his maneuvers would evolve from spontaneous genius into institutional doctrine. The first shift occurred in the simulation labs. Analysts recreated the battle using every available data point: pitch, angles, acceleration curves, firing windows, enemy reaction times. When seasoned pilots were placed inside high-fidelity simulators and asked to replicate the scenario, most failed within seconds. They followed standard evasive patterns, respected flight limitations, and treated the engagement as an exercise in calculated caution. The result was always the same. They were overwhelmed and shot down, just as doctrine predicted. But when the simulation was altered to allow unorthodox movements, deep dives, vertical slingshots, micro-roll adjustments, the results changed. Pilots who abandoned textbook predictability suddenly found themselves able to fragment the enemy formation. The conclusion was unavoidable. The rookie had unconsciously pioneered a method of rhythmic disruption, a tactic that forced the enemy to react faster than their formation protocol allowed. Engineers refined the physics behind the maneuver, eventually naming the key phase the dynamic inversion window, the moment in which a pilot uses momentum to reposition beneath or behind a formation in a single fluid motion. Previously considered too risky for real combat, it was now being reframed as a last resort power play capable of flipping an engagement on its head. And the rookie had executed it not with caution, but with ferocious instinct. Military tacticians were fascinated by another element: the psychological component. His unpredictable movements triggered confusion loops among the enemy pilots, overwhelming their command structure and inducing panic. This effect proved repeatable in controlled tests. When formations encountered a pilot who broke rhythm and violated expected patterns, their internal coordination faltered. Decision trees collapsed. Communication scrambled. The entire unit lost cohesion. Training programs began to incorporate this insight. Instead of punishing pilots for breaking formation logic, instructors encouraged controlled unpredictability in high-pressure simulations. The idea was no longer to follow doctrine flawlessly, but to weaponize deviation, use spontaneity as a strategic asset. And then came the most radical development. Air forces started designing aircraft modifications that supported the rookies' impossible maneuver. Reinforced frames, adaptive thrust algorithms, short-burst key tolerance enhancements. Machines were being built not to protect pilots from heist maneuvers, but to enable them. Within a year, several elite squadrons quietly adopted a new combat module based directly on the rookies' engagement. Though never publicly acknowledged, it became known internally as pattern collapse tactics, a doctrine emphasizing the manipulation of enemy expectations through aggressive, rhythmic disruption. The rookie's madness had become methodology. But while militaries institutionalized his accidental genius, one question still loomed. What did the rookie think of all this? Did he understand the magnitude of what he had done? Or was he as bewildered as the commanders around him? To answer that, we must examine the legacy he unknowingly left behind, one that reached far beyond the cockpit and into the evolving philosophy of modern warfare. Long after the fires were extinguished and the wreckage removed from the battlefield, the echoes of the rookie's 90-second triumph continued to reverberate through military institutions across the globe. His name, once barely known within his own squadron, became a whispered reference among strategists, a curious paradox among psychologists, and a symbol of disruptive brilliance among pilots in training. But what truly cemented his legacy wasn't the number of planes he shot down. It was the shift he triggered in how warfare itself was understood. Commanders began to recognize that the rookie had embodied a truth that doctrine often ignores. War is not a game of perfect patterns. It's a collision of human instinct and mechanical possibility. In those 90 seconds, he revealed that unpredictability can be stronger than symmetry, that improvisation can outmaneuver discipline, and that instinct, when sharpened by fear and clarity, can break through even the most mathematically rigid formations. His legacy grew not from myth-making, but from measurable impact. Combat manuals were quietly rewritten. Tactical schools added new modules inspired by his maneuver sequences. Pilots were told only how to follow established patterns, but how to fracture them when survival demanded it. The rookie, through instinct rather than intention, liberated them from the invisible cage of predictability. Yet the man behind the legend remained an enigma. Interviews recorded months after the event revealed that he struggled to articulate what he had done. He often shrugged, describing his actions as just reacting or seeing something open up. This confusion only deepened the fascination surrounding him. How could someone so unaware of their own brilliance produce a transformation that veteran tacticians had failed to unlock over decades? Some historians portray him as a prodigy who glimpsed the future of combat. Others see him as an accidental pioneer, one who stumbled into genius because he had not yet learned the limits that restrain more experienced pilots. But regardless of interpretation, the impact was undeniable. His unrepeatable feat became a cornerstone for a new philosophy of warfare, one that values adaptive randomness, split-second courage, and the raw human capacity to sense opportunity in chaos. Even rival nations took notice. Intelligence reports later confirmed that foreign air forces attempted to reverse-engineer the rookie's maneuver, seeking to determine whether it could be trained, replicated, or infused into machine learning combat programs. Ironically, most failed because they underestimated the instinctive intangible fusion of fear, clarity, and impulse that no algorithm could fully emulate. And yet, despite the global reverberations of his actions, the rookie himself never transformed into the media hero that his commanders once feared he might become. He avoided interviews, resisted promotions, and returned to the cockpit with a quiet humility that contrasted sharply with the legend forming around him. To those who knew him, he remained the same, a modest young man who survived an impossible encounter and never fully grasped why. Perhaps that is the final lesson of his legacy. Brilliance in war is not always polished, intentional, or refined. Sometimes it emerges in the raw, unfiltered moment when a human mind refuses to surrender to logic, when instinct becomes weapon, when fear becomes clarity, when the impossible becomes reality. His 90 seconds did not just alter a battle, they altered the very fabric of aerial combat. If you made it all the way through the incredible story of the rookie who rewired the sky, then you're exactly the kind of person who keeps this channel alive. So, before you go, take a moment to subscribe and activate notifications. This ensures you never miss another deep dive into the forgotten tactics, shocking decisions, and unbelievable moments that shaped military history. And if you're still here, you've earned a place in the conversation. Drop a comment saying, 90 seconds can change everything. This simple phrase tells me you're part of the group that truly values these hidden stories and helps push this content to more people. Don't forget to leave a like. It's a small action that makes a massive difference in helping these stories reach a wider audience. And now, if you want to keep exploring the mysteries, brilliance, and chaos of warfare, click on the next video that's appearing on your screen. It picks up right where this one leaves off, diving even deeper into the strategies that changed the world.